Ruslan.
What you believe about the world, what you believe about God will determine how you behave. I say this all the time, but it's especially true when it comes to the idea of eschatology. And so this video is not recommended to go over anybody's head, speak over anybody's head, anything like that. And both of these people that I'm going to talk about, I disagree with on a variety of issues. Johnny Mac, John MacArthur versus Dr. James White about post-millennialism and specifically losing down here is what John MacArthur said. So I'm gonna play you guys the video and then I'm gonna play Dr. James's White response. Now, if you don't know what post-millennialism is a view that the tribulation, the most of revelation has already happened, and that Jesus is going to win back the world in a way and have a 1,000-year reign. It's a more optimistic view of the world. I covered this in my reaction to Mike Winger's video. Now, John MacArthur is not a post-millennialist. Dr. James White is a post-millennialist, as well as Jeff Durbin and some of those guys from the Apologia side. And they're both Reformed and they're both Calvinists and they both hold a high view of Scripture and all that kind of stuff. Check this clip out.
Guess what? We don't win down here. We lose. You ready for that? Oh, you were a post-millennialist. You thought we were just going to go waltzing into the kingdom as you took over the world. No. We lose here. Get it? They killed Jesus. They killed all the apostles. We're all going to be persecuted. If any man come after me, let him, what? Deny himself.
First of all, I'm not a big fan of Johnny Mac, primarily for just how he speaks sometimes. I'm not saying everything he's ever said is wrong. But let's just say this. It's very ironic that a man that's worth tens of millions of dollars is telling his congregation that we lose down here. Two, it's a miscategorization of the post-millennial position. And he goes on further and digs himself a deeper hole.
Garbage of prosperity gospel. No, we don't win down here. Are you ready for that? Just to clear the air, I love this clarity. We don't win. We lose on this battlefield. Not only is this a person that is extremely prosperous, is extremely prosperous, is extremely successful, has one of the biggest ministries, one of the biggest Bible colleges, seminaries. Oh my gosh. And he's paralleling the post-millennial position and lumping it in with the prosperity gospel. Dr. James White, who is a post-millennialist, post-millennialist, had a really good response to it, and I wanted to highlight it. And again, I don't agree with everything both of these guys say. I actually disagree with both of them on how they engage with social issues, and more disagree with John MacArthur on this. But check out Dr. James White's response to this.
And as I understand it, the post-millennial commitment fundamentally is found in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. God, in fulfilling the promise of Psalm 110:1 and 2, is putting under the feet of Jesus all his enemies, and the last enemy is death. God has started doing that. God started doing that as soon as Jesus rose from the dead. He's been continuing to do that ever since then.
Watch the video I did to reacting to Mike Winger so you kind of have more context on the different eschatological positions. There's a variety of them. There's not just one, even though in America we're presented as just one, and that's why we have a lot of the issues we have. There's a variety of them, and the pre-millennial position is we have to suffer tribulation, suffer horrible things. The church is going to be persecuted, and then Jesus is going to come back. The post-millennial position is that, hey, we're going to have a 1,000-year reign of flourishing, the gospel being sent forth, revival, and then Jesus is going to come back, right? So listen to how Dr. James White keeps talking about this.
But it's not a straight line. It seems to me that Dr. MacArthur has the idea it's a straight line, and it's just straight up to heaven. That's not how it's ever been. And when I think of someone like Rushdoony, he knows church history.
Listen up.
And what's attractive to me about this is I know church history. And one of the most important things for me right now is I just know that there have been so many times in the history of the church that if I had lived at that time, I would have been tempted to have a wrong view of the future.
Having a wrong view of the future depending on which time in church history you lived through. There's been massive persecution, massive tribulation for multiple generations of Christians, right?
Judging on what was happening in my day. You cannot determine your eschatology this way, but we all do it that way. Whether we want to admit it or not,
we all do it that way.
We are tempted to do it that way, and we cannot completely avoid doing it that way.
I.e., don't build your eschatological view through current events. Hello.
Because we're trying to look past this next thing called the next second, and we can't do it. And so I look at church history, and I see ups and downs. I see dark, dark periods and then periods of great blessing. And it's not a line like this. It's an up and down type thing. But I see Christ's enemies being put under his feet. And it seems from this perspective that if Christ's enemies are going to be put under his feet, it's just simply going to be at the big smackdown at Armageddon. That's when the enemies are put under his feet. But most of his enemies are not nations or tanks or things like that. They're systems of thought.
Look, most of his enemies, listen, are not nations or people. They're systems. They're systems of thought. They're systems of thought. Why is this important? Why is this important? Because if you're consistently otherizing people and you're consistently us versus them, they're evil, we're the good guys, the world is binary, the bad guys are gonna beat the good guys and it's all gonna go to hell and it's gonna happen any minute now, like any minute in our, right? You start having a us versus them mentality, that is not helpful.
And do you really subjugate a system of thought by just simply wiping out everybody who holds it?
This is, by the way, the right's critique of the left. Right? This literally is it. Do you wipe away a system of thought by wiping out everybody who holds it? We want tolerance except for the people who are intolerant, right? We want tolerance except for the people who disagree with us. These are not helpful tactics, okay? On regardless on what you believe about the world of eschatology.
Or do you put those enemies under the feet through the defeat of that system? What if we're going into a really dark period?
What if we're going through a really dark period? Listen, those of you guys that are premillennials, those of you guys that are looking for the tribulation, those of you guys that are freaking out about the vaccine, those of you guys that are freaking out about all the current events, the rise of socialism, you're freaking out, right? Listen to what he's saying.
That may last for generations. What if we're going in a really dark period? There's no one alive today that will actually see the end of this dark period. Ooh.
Scary.
Does any of that change the truthfulness of the Christian faith? For a lot of people, it does. And that's somewhat of a problem. My commitment is that I want to do everything I can. And we may have to do it secretly. We may have to do it underground.
Like in China and North Korea?
We have to do it through the church. We have to do it through teaching our children and our grandchildren. But I want to communicate the truth that Jesus Christ is Lord and what that means in all of its glory.
Come on.
And the fact that mankind in all of his wisdom, dig as deep as you want. All you're going to find is the more you learn about how we exist, what the universe is around us, it's all going to end up reflecting the glory of Jesus.
Come on.
He's the creator. He's behind it all. How do I communicate that? How do I pass that down? So they can look back and go, there were those that God used to safeguard the faith. That once for all delivered to the saints' faith. Now, God's going to do it. I want to be in on it.
I appreciate Dr. James White saying this. I appreciate the whole video is good. You guys should watch it. It's a good correction. Now, why am I talking about this? Hear me loud and clear. I'm talking about this for a variety of reasons. One, what you believe will determine how you behave. If you believe that we're supposed to lose down here, coming from somebody that's worth tens of millions of dollars, how does that work? Someone that's worth tens of millions of dollars is telling you that we're going to lose down here, who has one of the most thriving churches in all of the West Coast, is telling you that we're going to lose down here. That doesn't look like losing, Johnny Mac. That looks like you winning, my friend. That you're crushing. So the irony in that statement, it's like LeBron James saying, hey, you're never going to make anything of yourself. You're losing down here because, hey, even though LeBron's at an elite level, he's going to tell other people that, we're just going to lose out here. So how do you define losing? What does that mean? Losing how? What does that mean? So that's interesting. The critique of the prosperity church would equate winning with money, right? That's their critique. Like, just because God blesses something with money, that's not winning, right? Two, what you believe about the world will determine how you behave. If you believe that the world is going to hell in a handbasket, what then is the motivation for you to do anything with your life? If you believe that Jesus is going to come back at any minute and everything is going to go to hell, why do anything? Why live out Matthew 25 and be a good steward? So if we're looking at eschatology, it doesn't matter what your belief is on eschatology. I really don't care if you're premillennial, postmillennial. It doesn't really matter to me. But if we're going to look at eschatology, you can't just read Matthew 24 and skip Matthew 25. Read Matthew 24 and Matthew 25. And what you'll find is there's a lot in there about stewardship. There's a lot in there about caring for the least of these, feeding people and clothing people. Guess what? You got to win in some capacity to pull that off. You got to do something in your life to pull that off. To pull it off, meaning it requires resource. It requires money. It requires influence. It requires mobility. It requires strategy. All of that. Wisdom. Yes, all of that. Now, my third point is this whole notion that Christians are we're just incapable of influencing the world for good. We're incapable of doing anything that's helpful to the world. And so then we develop a persecution complex. And worse, we assume that anyone who's successful had to have sold their soul to the devil. And then any education or any, explanation of this is why this worked and this is why this person is successful, we dismiss it and say, it's because they love Satan and that's why they're successful. The most obvious manifestation of this is with all the Illuminati stuff. Someone becomes successful, they get to a certain degree you didn't think they should have gotten to, and all of a sudden they're in the Illuminati, right? And I guarantee you, at some point, whether it's 1 million subscribers for me or 100,000 subscribers for me, there will be goofy videos made about me being a part of the agenda. I promise you. I'll give you another really practical example. I just did a video about the artist Simlar, who put out the record Preacher's Kid. And I started the video. This is an LGBTQ artist who put out this record. It's kind of a troll to the Christian music industry. And I did a video about it. And I opened the video up with saying, hey guys, here are some things she did good from a social media branding storytelling perspective. Here's some things she did good that we as Christians can learn from, even though I disagree with everything else that she did. I didn't think the music was very good. I didn't think it was glorifying God. I don't think it's a good message. I don't think it's consistent with the scriptures. I don't think it's consistent with historical Christianity. But listen, we can learn from this side. You know the kind of comments I get? How could you say she did anything good? She's a spawn of Satan. Literally. These are the kind of comments. Well, it doesn't matter if someone's successful because they're Satan agenda, and you can't be successful in the music industry if you don't love Satan with all your heart. And I'm like, fam, what are you talking about? What energy are you on to say that kind of stuff? And it comes from this, we're looking for a persecution, we're gonna get persecuted, all this stuff that Johnny Mac is pushing, who's worth $14 million, by the way. We're not gonna talk about that part. God forbid you go make some money and go build an audience for yourself while Johnny Mac builds a freaking empire. We're not gonna talk about the irony of that, right? Because he loves the Lord, right? So now we're gonna say, hey, we can't learn from anybody, and I'll give you guys some names of Christians in culture and in society crushing it, uncompromising on sin. Okay, here are some names. Alex Dion Wilson. Go look him up on TikTok. Alex Dion Wilson has over 1 million followers on TikTok. I think he just cracked 25,000 subscribers on YouTube. One of his last videos was about LGBTQ and the gospel. He does not compromise. Want to know another name? I don't know. How about Alan Parr, who has over 500,000 subscribers, repeatedly speaking against sin, clearly preaching gospel, thriving in the marketplace. Oh, I don't know. How about Mike Winger, who's crushing it, doing hour-long Bible studies with 200,000 plus subscribers? Oh, I don't know. How about What Do You Meme, who's never backed down from a single controversial issues and presses into it, and his channel just cracked 120,000. There are Christians all over culture, all over society, winning for Jesus and pressing the gospel forward, and they're doing an amazing job. So I don't know how you define winning, Johnny Mac, but that sounds like winning. Hey, I get to share my faith on a public platform with over billions of users. I could preach the gospel. I don't have to water it down, and I can make a living while doing it. Nah, Ruslan, the world's going to hell in a handbasket. You can't learn anything from non-Christians. No, there's no way. They're gonna hate us. They hate everything about. You know what I think it is? And you guys are gonna hate me for saying this. Some of you Christians are gonna hate me. It's not about premillennial or postmillennial. You know what it is? They don't like our methodology. In my video, clearly saying this is outside the lines of orthodoxy, critiquing the LGBTQ pro artist, you guys needed me to go harder. You needed me to really condemn her. Hey, just to be clear, any sex outside of a single man, single woman marriage is sinful. Anything, okay? So I don't need to consistently go on a specific group and kind of pound down this one specific group that's been treated awfully by the church. It's clear what that is. It's all over the scripture. I believe the Bible. That's a sin too. But let me just be more specific. That word sexual immorality, porneia, in the original, it's a junk drawer term. It means anything outside of covenantal marriage is sinful. Your browser history, the shows you probably shouldn't be watching, the gossip you probably shouldn't be reading. I'll give you another example. Here's another example. Any sexual, okay. An accountability group, I'm not even going to allude to who it is, but an accountability group, a lot of guys have confessed, struggling with pornography, right? Pornography. Now, that's a big struggle for a lot of people. I've struggled with it before, right? I also have had victory, amazing, incredible victory in it, right? Now, there was a couple of guys throughout the years, this is gonna sound wild to some of you guys, and I don't mean to be crass or whatever, they didn't look at porn. You know what they did? In their act of sexual immorality, you know what they did? They would lay down on a carpet, and they didn't technically masturbate, and they didn't look at porn, but they would grind themselves on the carpet as their way of release. I'm not trying to be graphic. Sexual immorality is everything. Okay, that too. So whatever little weird thing you got going on in your browser history, your thought life, whatever, and yes, there's different consequences for sure. There's different consequences, right? But I've known multiple guys that have done that, and then we're gonna say, oh, well, that's technically they're not looking at anything and they're not committing blah, 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 right? Sexual immorality is a junk drawer term intended to say anything. Now, yes, it is different when someone takes on and this becomes their identity. Yes, it's different. There's different consequences of that. But sexual sin is sexual sin. Like, there's nothing in the scriptures that says Christians have to speak out about sin A, B, and C repeatedly to be recognized as Christians. Hey, how about all you goofballs that are sleeping with your girlfriend right now? How about all you goofballs that are living together before marriage? But you need me to talk about the LGBT agenda. I'm not saying there isn't one. I'm just saying, how about we clean up our own house? Right? I'm saying, how about we clean up our own house? I'm saying, how about we stop looking at the world and trying to hold the world to the standards of the church? And how about we just hold the church to the standards of the church? They are hostile to the gospel, for sure. For sure. But a lot of times, they're hostile to our methodology. They're hostile to the way we engage on social issues. They're hostile on our lack of desire to build bridges and build common ground with people that we may disagree with on their worldview and their faith, but we could still find common ground on other issues. I don't know, like fighting sex trafficking, right? Like we could partner with people on that. Like that is a overflow of a Christian worldview. We should not want that. And so guys, I don't care what your theological framework is, but if you don't believe that you can win as a Christian on this side of eternity, and yes, I'm using the word win, and by win, I mean flourishing, and by flourishing, I mean you preaching the gospel and making disciples, right? Making fellow followers of Jesus, whether that's on YouTube, whether that's on TikTok, whether that's on Instagram, whether that's at your job. If you don't believe that you can do that, you're going to behave accordingly. And then you're going to run around and say flippant stuff and be okay with being known with what you're against and say, oh, well, the world hates me. Look, they persecuted Jesus, so they're persecuting me. They persecuted Jesus because he was under a Roman evil empire with a freaking claiming to be God and blaspheming. That's why they persecuted Jesus. He didn't live in North America with air conditioning, religious freedom in the Constitution, and a Supreme Court that just said that churches are allowed to gather despite whatever the health regulations is. A little bit of a different context, is it not? So just something to think about. Just something to think about. Just something to think about. I know some of you guys are mad at me. It's okay, you're allowed to be mad at me. This isn't even about eschatology. This is really about how do you view the world? You can't learn anything from a non-Christian. You can't learn anything from a non-Christian. You can't learn anything from somebody that's in sin. Any level of success that anybody has had is just, well, it's just because they just love Satan. Just because they love Satan. Really? Really? Huh? Gosh. That will be a self-fulfilling prophecy for you. That will be a self-fulfilling prophecy for you. You will then live according to that theology that you've framed, looking and waiting for persecution, being reckless with your mouth, and assuming that the world hates you because of Jesus. No. The world hates you because you're a jerk. And I have no problem with being hated for Jesus. I have no problem with being canceled for Jesus. I have a problem with letting my dumb mouth say something stupid on Twitter without no context, no tone. 90% of communication is nonverbal. I have a problem with getting canceled for something like that. I have a problem with getting canceled for something like that. I don't have a problem with getting persecuted for Jesus. Live ready. Go read Matthew 24 and 25. Really read those two chapters. Really read them as one context and one thought, right? Passages over verses, right? Chapters over passages, books over chapters, so on and so forth. Anyway, let me know what y'all think.
Kingstream Entertainment. Ruslan.
Joshua the king came down and bore it all. Yeah, conversations front of the fireplace. All of my mistakes, how do I erase? Wanna operate at a higher pace. Birth pains causing the body to dilate. On a first name basis with the worst pain facing. Moments